This story is called My Wife of 9 Years Cheated with Two Men at Her Friend's Bachelorette Party. It was my wife's best friend's bachelorette party. They had planned a weekend at a cabin, and my wife was really excited to go. I trusted her and didn't think anything of it. The night before she left, she came into our bedroom while I was getting ready for bed. She sat on the bed next to me, and I could tell she had something on her mind. She said to me, "Thank you for letting me go. I just want to go and have fun and support my friend who is getting married in a few weeks." I said, "Of course, have a great time." She then leaned in to kiss me, and we went to bed. The next morning, she left early with her friends. I didn't hear from her much over the weekend, which wasn't unusual, but we did text each other a lot. On Sunday night, she sent me a text saying that she was on her way home and would be home in a few hours. When she got home, she looked like she had a good time and she was very happy. The next day I went to work and my wife went to her friend's house to help her get ready for the wedding. Over the next few weeks, my wife was helping her friend prepare for her wedding. She would leave work and go to her friend's house for a few hours, a couple of days a week. Then one day while I was at work, I overheard some coworkers saying something about a video surfacing about what went on at this bachelorette party at this cabin. I asked what they were talking about, and they said that apparently this video shows a woman getting banged by two men. At this point, I didn't know who the woman was. Over the next couple of days, I started hearing more people talk about this video, and I was sort of curious. So, after work one day, my wife wasn't home yet. So, I started digging around on the computer, going to different websites to see if I could find this video people were talking about, but I couldn't find anything. My wife came home a few hours later, and I asked her about the video. She had a confused look on her face. She didn't know anything about a video. So, I laughed it off and said, "I wonder what went on at that cabin." I couldn't see my wife's face. The next day I went to work, and as soon as I sat down at my desk, one of my coworkers said, "Hey, have you seen that video?" I told him I hadn't been able to find it. He pulled out his phone and started showing me the video. It was the same video that people have been talking about. I was in complete shock. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It shows four half-naked men walking into the cabin with all the women in the background cheering. And then the men started going around one by one, dancing in front of all the women. I am still laughing because I assume that's all that went on. But then the video keeps going, and it shows one of the men getting really close to this woman who happened to be my wife. My whole demeanor changed. I was no longer laughing. She starts touching him. And then another man comes up behind her, and he starts touching her as well. It gets worse. One man picks my wife up over his shoulder and takes her in this room, and the other man follows. My mouth hit the floor. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Eventually, both men come out of the room with my wife following behind them. She has a big smile on her face, and she's completely naked. The video ends there, and I just sat there in shock. I didn't know what to do, but I gathered my composure. I then asked my coworker, "Can he send me the video?" Which he did. I wasn't going to tell my wife what I just saw. I am angry, devastated. She cheated with these two strange men without a hitch, like it was nothing and I didn't matter. So, the rest of the day at work, I was a zombie. I couldn't even think straight, but I finally got a hold of myself and made some phone calls. I called a friend of mine who's a lawyer and I asked him what I should do. He told me to take my time and think about what I want to do. But, he also said if it were him, he would go ahead and file for divorce. After the brief conversation with my friend, I called a divorce lawyer to find out what I could do based on my wife cheating and what she was entitled to. I told him we had no kids, but we own the house that we have a mortgage on and we both have jobs. He told me if I wanted to stay in the house, I could file for divorce and try to get my wife out of the house, but it would be a long battle and I may not win. So, after talking with two different lawyers, I made my decision. I was going to divorce my wife. I would file for divorce the next day. There wasn't a damn thing she could say to me why she did that to me. And I'm thinking she doesn't even know about the video. That night, I couldn't even sleep. I was so upset. I just kept thinking about that video and how my wife could do something like that to me. The next morning, I woke up early around 6 a.m. I couldn't go back to sleep. So, I got out of bed, got dressed, and went to work. My wife was still asleep. I didn't even say anything to her. For those of you who are wondering, we haven't been intimate and I haven't initiated anything with my wife since that video. When I got to work, I told my boss I needed to take some time off. He could tell something was wrong, but he didn't ask any questions. I then went home while my wife was at work. I began to pack some of her clothes and other things, and I packed up a couple of suitcases and put them by the door. When I was finished, I waited until about 11:30 in the morning or so. I pulled out my phone, found the link to the video, and sent it to my wife. It showed that she read it right away. When I saw that, I immediately FaceTimed her and told her I wanted a divorce. I already filed and she needs to come get her stuff. She hung up on me, and then she called me back about 5 minutes later and told me she was on her way home. I told her when she gets here, I will be upstairs in my office and I don't want to see her face. When she gets home, she is crying and bawling, asking where in the hell did I get this video? I told her, I am not telling you that, you just need to leave. She then says, I am not going anywhere. This is my house too. She then says, we are married. You can't just kick me out. I told her we won't be married for long. She gets on her phone and calls her best friend, crying and telling her friend that I am trying to kick her out of the house. And I have this video of her. Her best friend then tells her she needs to come over to her house and she will call a lawyer for her. So, my wife hangs up the phone, grabs a couple of suitcases and leaves. Then her best friend calls me and asks why am I trying to kick her out of the house? I promptly send my wife's best friend the link. I assumed that my wife had shown her, but apparently not. After my wife's best friend saw the video, she told me she would be contacting a lawyer for my wife and that I needed to leave my wife alone. I told my wife's friend, this is between my wife and me, not you. And for your information, I have already filed for divorce. As the days go by, my wife is texting me, calling me, pleading, and leaving voicemails. I didn't respond at all. I then get a call from my wife's lawyer. He asks, do I have a lawyer? I promptly gave him that information. He said, thank you, and hung up the phone. A few days later, I received paperwork from my wife's lawyer. It was divorce paperwork. I read through the paperwork and faxed it to my lawyer. I also emailed my lawyer, letting him know that I received the paperwork. A few days after that, I get a call from my lawyer and I ask him, what is my soon-to-be ex-wife asking for? He then proceeds to tell me she is asking for half of everything, the house and one car. He said, surprisingly, she is not asking for alimony. I told him her father is wealthy. He owns 4 hotels and a bunch of other businesses. So, I am pretty sure she will be just fine. I then told my lawyer, I want her out of the house and I want her name off of everything. He said that is going to be a little difficult, but he will see what he can do. A few weeks later, I am at work and I get a call from my lawyer, and he said he had some bad news. He said, since her name is on the deed, you can't just kick her out. And since she wants half of the house, you probably will have to sell it. I told him, I don't want to sell the house. I love that house. It was our first home together. He then said, the choice is yours, but if you don't sell the house, you will have to go to court and fight for it. So, I told my attorney, I plan to fight for the house and I don't want to sell it. A few weeks later, I am served with divorce papers and a court date is set. I show up to court and so does my wife. We both have our lawyers with us. The judge asks my wife what she wants, and she says half of everything, the house and one car. The judge then looks at me and asks my lawyer, what does his client want? My attorney says he wants a divorce and he wants her out of the house and her name off of everything. The judge looks at both lawyers and then looks at us, and he asks us if there is anything we can agree on. My wife and I look at each other and we both shake our heads. No. The judge then says here in Alabama, which is a no-fault state, can be fault-based as well. And adultery is one of those faults. The judge, who is a woman, looks at my wife and says, young lady, you have committed adultery and I am going to grant your husband a divorce on the grounds of adultery. The judge then looks at my wife and says, ma'am, I am ordering you to move out of the house within 30 days, but you have a mortgage together. I can't do anything about that. You have to work that out with your mortgage lender. He then says, sir, she can move back into the house. If she wants, it's the marital home and she has a right to it. But if she does move back in, she has 30 days to move back out. The judge then looks at me and says, I am ordering you to pay the mortgage until it is paid off or sold. The judge asks if there is anything else, and her lawyer says that my wife wants one of the cars. The judge looks at me and says, is that true? I then tell the judge, yes, she can have one of the cars, but she has to pay for it herself. The judge says she can have the car. After that, the judge grants the divorce. About a week later, after the divorce, my ex-wife sends me a text saying she will not be moving back in. She just wants her part of the equity in the home, and she will sign the house over to me. I text her back and I tell her the only equity we have is $30,000, and I told her I would give her half of that once I refinanced. Once I refinanced and all the other legal stuff was taken care of, I gave her half of the small equity we had in the home. A few months later, my wife's father dies and she inherits $3 million. Yeah, she didn't need anything from me. Even if her father didn't pass away, she would have still been okay. Her father would have looked after her, and I will not take her back just because she inherited millions, and she has tried. She has called and texted, but I have not responded and I will not. I know a lot of responses were take her back because of the money, but I didn't want to touch her. I didn't think of her the same. To this day, her best friend and my ex-wife still doesn't know who recorded the video at the cabin that weekend. Well, after all that drama, I am a free man. I was surprised at the responses I got on this site, but I guess these forums can be helpful. Thank you all for your awesome support. As a man in his 40s, I am absolutely grateful that I didn't